It's October, ladies and germs, and that means it's spooky games time. Horror, of course, has a special place in my heart, it being one of my favorite genres for movies, television, and of course video games. Especially video games, since I think the interactive element of a video game adds a whole nother level of fear, since your actions are what determines if your PC survives or not. That makes it far more scary than just watching horny teenagers die. Last year, I reviewed Parasite Eve, the Squeenix body horror classic, and since I did that, well, it only felt appropriate this year to review the game I used in that video's intro, Midways The Suffering. Yeah, something that, in spite of sharing the same genre technically with Parasite Eve, is the literal antithesis of it. I realize now that particular statement is actually incredibly apt. West versus East, law versus chaos, action versus turn-based RPG. I'm not going to compare the two, obviously, since they're two totally different games, but I just thought it was a funny thing to note. That and I needed an intro for this video. Anyway, The Suffering is a 2004 horror action game that saw release on PlayStation 2 and Xbox on March 8th, 2004 in North America, and later saw release to Windows on June 7th of the same year. Fun fact about The Suffering, 4 years after its initial release on PC, it was released as freeware to the internet by the United States Air Force. Why? No clue, but it's the best thing my tax dollars have ever paid to have happen. I did my playthrough on PC, though I paid for a GOG copy, truth be told. If you plan on doing the same, be sure to install the Suffering AIO fan patch and delete the D sound files from your game's directory. I don't know why, but those files seem to crash my game intermittently, which basically meant I lost about 3 playthroughs of progress, each about an hour or so. Installing the patch and deleting those files made the game fully stable, though there are some minor graphical glitches that still occurred on occasion, most notably being my gun's icons not being in the inventory squares. Now, onto the review proper. When you begin The Suffering, you're dropped into the shoes of Torque, silent protagonist, and an inmate fresh off a conviction for allegedly murdering his wife Carmen and their 2 kids, Corey and Malcolm. Left ambiguous is if he actually committed those crimes or not, with Torque having blacked the events of the night in question out. Regardless, he was convicted and sent straight to death row to be carried out at Abbott State Penitentiary. Torque's tossed into his cell while his fellow inmates deliver exposition about him.
That's Torque, the man himself. Word is he shaved half the Aryan Brotherhood over at Easton.
If that's true, this dude and his little swastika tattoo should probably be a bit afraid. Your fellow inmates also monologue about each other too, giving you a little bit of info about them before their inevitable demises.
Floyd's a degenerate parasite. They should have slapped the cuffs on him coming out of his mama's
At least
tongue.
I know.
Will you shut the fuck up, you baby-raping, sodomizing sack of shit!
An earthquake hits. Chaos begins to erupt and all your blockmates are eliminated one by unknown forces. A brutish monster slashes open your cell door and the game proper begins. A very interesting note about The Suffering is that you can choose to play the game with either a third-person camera or a first-person camera. Which way should you play? Honestly, it's up to you. I think both are totally fine, though in third-person you have access to an evasive role, and I think the animation and hitboxes on your melee weapons are a bit better in third person as well. I decided to go first person for this playthrough since 1, I've never actually played The Suffering in first person, and 2, I figured it'd be much more spooky to play with a limited field of view. Back to the game though, after exploring your surroundings a bit and watching a CO die close up, you pick up your very first weapon in the classic prison shiv, though you pull it out of one of your fellows, which makes me question where it came from exactly. Armed and dangerous, Torque, inspired by John McClane, heads out into the depths of Abbott State Penitentiary with no shoes on. Mad lad. Countless more COs and inmates fall victim to these mysterious monsters. At first you'll just catch minor glimpses of them until you're finally face to face with the first of the game's monsters. Malefactors, as they're called here, this one being specifically called the Slayer. The thing I want to compliment the most about The Suffering is its monster design. It's absolutely fantastic. So to your bog standard zombie or vampire, The Suffering's malefactors are horrifying aberrations that represent either Abbott's various methods of executing the inmates sent there, or are manifestations of the atrocities that have been committed all across Carnate and its dark history. Slayers, of course, with their bladed limbs and severed head attached via a metal box, represents execution via decapitation, though I'm not sure if execution via decapitation was ever carried out in the US. They're fast, they scuttle around, they scream a lot, and get really mad if you shoot him in the face. They're the basic enemy of The Suffering, so not too durable. You shiv the first one to death pretty easily. Slayers, uniquely, have a captain variant, which is bigger, angrier, and can block your bullets. They're more durable too, so they'll take a couple extra shots to go down. Alongside Slayers, you'll be facing Marksmen, which represent death via firing squad, something that was routine on Abbott when it was a German POW camp during World War II, even pretty routine on innocent American soldiers. Then there's the Mainliner, which are probably my favorite monsters in the Suffering, to be honest. They represent lethal injection, obviously, and are just so nasty and disgusting looking, complemented by the agonizing, gurgling screams they emanate constantly, since, well, they literally have deadly poison being injected into them constantly. They scuttle along the floor, throwing poison needles at you, and are the one monsters that will leap on you and forcefully attempt to inject you with the same poison. Noosemen are the sneaky little buggers that drop down from the ceiling and attempt to strangle you. They represent lynching as well as flaying alive, a reference to an event in Carnate's history where a bunch of inmates, pissed off that their comrades were left buried alive by the COs in a mining incident, hung and skinned 5 COs in an act of revenge. Burrowers represent those buried inmates. They're creatures that burrow through the ground like graboids and pop up to attack you with lashing chains and hooks. Let it rip, boys. Festers represent the damned spirits of the crew of a slave ship who crashed their ship on Carnate Island and simply left their slave cargo behind to be devoured by rats instead of letting them out. I cannot imagine a more horrifying fate than that. Festers are fairly dangerous foes, considering they can only die via the fire axe or Molotovs. You definitely want to use Molotovs on them all you can, since the burning fire kills the rats they spew almost instantly. Lastly, and most generically, come the Inferna, creepy little girls who burst into fire ghosts and attack you with the flames, obviously. These little girls were from a Puritan colony on Carnate, and for fun, they accused a ton of innocent people of witchcraft, which always ended with those innocents being burned alive. Unfortunately for them, I'm not afraid of children, because I have something the Puritans didn't have. A machine gun. All these malefactors have their own fun little histories, which of course I just described, and which you can read about via Clem's journal after you encounter them in the game. You'll also be able to read about the various locations and horrifying history of Carnate via Consuelo's journal, or you can listen to either of them narrate it. Barring the Nooseman, all these monsters present a pretty real threat to you, and you'll need to take them down as quickly as you can. Malefactors also attack each other too, but you'll mainly see this in cutscene form. I don't even remember a point where they did it in-game. Outside of malefactors, you'll run across the occasional hostile human as well, the biggest bunch being Hargrave and his COs, which you battle in T-Block. Hargrave's a pretty normal human, but he does fight you with one of those 50 caliber machine gun turrets. All the COs here only have revolvers too, so they're not really that intimidating. Back to the game proper though, another cool effect is that when you're in the thick of battle, Torque can be covered in his enemy's blood. Journeying onward through the prison, you'll run into your first friendly NPC, the head CO, who sums up Abbott pretty well.
And Abbott is one fucked up hoosgow.
You'll also be presented with the first moral choice of the game. You see, the Suffering has a morality system, which, depending on whether you end up with good, evil, or neutral morality, will give you a different ending for the game, on top of what certain prison ghosts think of you. Karma will also affect certain dialogues, mostly the ones that come in near the end game battles. You'll also look like complete shit if you're evil. Holy hell, Torque, use some lotion, man. Being evil and hot is what's in, not this. Speaking of prison ghosts, though, throughout your journeys in Abbott, you'll be accosted by 3 of Abbott's most infamous characters. Electrocuted inmate Horace P. Gage, who went to jail on some unknown charge, and later got the chair after he slaughtered his wife during a conjugal visit, fearing he wouldn't be able to protect her while she was on the outside and him on the inside. Hermes T. Height, demented CO, who loved gassing inmates to death so much he ended up taking his own life in the gas chambers of Abbott simply because he was so obsessed with the antiquated way of execution. And lastly, the noteworthy Dr. Q.L. Killjoy, your average eccentric psychiatrist who, with good intentions, of course, put mentally ill people through barbaric treatments in an attempt to treat their various mental disorders. These 3 will be a constant in your journeys through Carnate, with Horace liking you if you're good, Hermes if you're bad, and Killjoy will always just be fascinated with you due to your psychoses. You get your biggest taste of these 3 ghosts alongside another of the game's integral mechanics. These 3 urge you to let go.
Show me why you're in here. I want to know all about you.
They won't leave you alone until you do it.
I can help you, Tom. I can make you well. I can give you control if you really want it. But first, you've got to show me.
What is it, though, exactly? Well, when you kill enough malefactors, you'll fill up what's called your insanity meter, and when that's full, well...
Problems here. Listen right in.
You can transform into a monster that easily plows through pretty much every enemy in the game, your fierce strikes splattering your foes into chunks of meat. Your Insanity mode is good to use for clearing out enemy-infested rooms, and can bail you out in a pinch if you're low on ammo or you're cornered like a rat. You'll also be haunted by the visions of your dead family, as well as by the ghosts of Carnate's past events. These kind of pop in randomly and help give you a direct eye into the horrifying events of Carnate's past. Back to our original moral quandary though, do you team up with the head CEO and try to survive this nightmare together, even though the CEOs of Abbott clearly don't care for the inmates whatsoever, and vice versa, of course? Or do you butcher this man for his gun out of pure hatred for them? I decided to go good for my playthrough because I like helping people, and because being a detached psychopath who kills everyone he runs across doesn't hold much appeal for me. Also, I don't have a poncho, and playing Huey Lewis in the news would get me demonetized. Basically, every moral quandary comes across this. You meet an NPC. Your wife begs you to let him live, while the monster within you demands you violently kill them.
He can teach you a lot. See what he has to say.
Kill him, kill him, kill him.
Your average moral system in action, really. You'll be presented with these semi-regularly as well, so just keep it in mind as you advance through the game. The NPCs who join you for a while are decently competent in a fight. They're helpful enough though if you're trying to keep them alive. But be cautious, NPC comrades are super fragile in this game, especially in your monster form. Regardless if you help the head CEO though, he dies at the hands of Horace P. Gage, and you get your first real weapon, a humble revolver. Suffering has a small selection of other weapons available to you too, and you'll come across them as you progress through the game. You'll eventually dual wield your revolvers like a badass for additional firepower, a Chicago typewriter for when you need more firepower, and a shotgun which you'll keep handy for those close encounters. Later on you can get a fire axe for melee, which you'll need for certain monsters, and apparently if you find the parts for it you can make a flamethrower. I missed out on that though, unfortunately. Capping weapons off, you'll also run across a 50 caliber machine gun turret on occasion, which has unlimited ammo. These are mainly used in the stationary sections where a billion malefactors will start popping out of nowhere, and you just have to mow them all down. There's a handful of these throughout the game for some reason. I don't really know why, since it doesn't really change up the gameplay at all, it just means you're stuck standing. That's it. Your conventional firearms will be supplemented by explosives, which you can throw at your foes. These include Molotov cocktails, which set opponents ablaze, flashbang grenades, which stun them instantly since they very much hate bright lights, and TNT and shrapnel, which both go boom and kill things real good. You'll also have some basic items too, a flashlight, which helps you illuminate the darkness around you, and Zombium, prescription painkillers, which serve as your med pack for this game. You can carry 9 of these at a time and can pop them at your convenience to restore health. Ammunition is pretty copious too, so as long as you're not a terrible shot, you'll usually never be caught lacking in any ammunition of any kind. Thrown explosives are in pretty good amounts too, so never be afraid to throw them out when you need them. Torque's journey across Carnate will take him from the prison with its POW camp routes to Killjoy's asylum. There's a rock quarry to navigate as well, to the town and docks where Carnate's few civilians reside. I do think it's weird you never run across any civilians though, only CEOs and inmates. Those NPCs that you do run across though are decently interesting, like Dallas, who spouts constant Wu-Tang Clan references.
Bring the ruckus, motherfucker.
Bring the motherfucking ruckus! Bring the motherfucking ruckus!
I ain't nothing to fuck with.
Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with! Wu-Tang Clan ain't nothing to fuck with!
Clem, whose journal chronicles the various malefactors on Carnate after the Cataclysm, and Ernesto, inmate-hating CEO, whose wife is the one who scrapbooks the various atrocities committed on Carnate over its years of existence. Another noteworthy NPC would be Sergey here, who you meet in the Killjoy Asylum. He's just content to smoke weed and drink booze while the world collapses around him. He actually only asks you to reactivate the power so we can listen to his music too. Keep on shining on, Sergey, you crazy diamond. Another thing I can compliment about The Suffering is its bleak, dreary atmosphere, which is absolutely perfect for a game with the backdrop of a prison. The game cuts a pretty good atmosphere for certain, one befitting of a place as dreary and full of latent evil as Carnate Island. The world building is also pretty nice, with a ton of history you can read about that really help flesh out the island itself. Adding to the atmosphere as well are the bleak, dark notes written by one Rance Truman, an inmate at Abbott Asylum. These pop up with every load screen, and they're all very dark and somber. I like them a lot. But what about what really matters, though? The gameplay. Suffering's got pretty good gunplay. You'll never really have problems blowing away the malefactors. The sounds of your guns are strong too, making them even more satisfying to gib your foes with. Even more satisfying is the splattering those monsters into bits in your monster form. I also really love the transforming roar that Torque bellows whenever he changes. God, I love that. The Suffering overall is a pretty well put together game. On to the end game though. The point of the Suffering is to make it to Carnate's docks and escape the Cursed Island. Which you do, obviously. As you advance onto the docks, you'll encounter the spirits of your family, and how they treat you will vary based on your karma level. Your family also reveals how the night of their deaths went down, and after each of them lecture you or chastise you, you'll take on Torque's inner demons. Stage 1, you fight your monster form, which you have to kill in your human form only. A pretty big challenge, truth be told, because it's very easy to get stun locked by your monster self.
There was nothing I could do. It was just, hey, I couldn't even dodge it. There was nothing you could do to get out of the way.
After that, you face your human self, which you have to beat in your monster form. An easy challenge, since you can stun lock him easily. And lastly comes the big final boss of the game, Torque's Inner Hatred, a gigantic monstrosity with a little Torque fuck doll dangling from an umbilical cord. Basically, all you have to do is avoid its attacks, juice yourself up with Killjoy's machine, then Hadouken the damn thing till it dies for good. Coast Guard boat sails up to Carnate, and from here, how the game goes depends on the karma you've accumulated over the course of your game. If Torque is pure evil, he kills the Coast Guard and runs back to the island in his monster form, content to live out his days there as a killing machine, I guess. And it turns out that, yes, he was the one that butchered his family in cold blood. If Torque has maintained neutrality somehow, he hops onto the boat, and the Coast Guard informs him that all inmates are to be turned over to the police on the mainland and transferred to another prison. Torque knocks out the Coast Guard member and drives the boat off to God knows where. In this scenario, Torque accidentally kills Carmen in a fit of rage, and Corey, having witnessed the sight, drowned Malcolm and then subsequently killed himself by jumping out the window. And if you're a goody two-shoes like me, Torque hops onto the boat with the Coast Guard member, actually informing him that he'll be getting a new trial for his case since the prosecutor of his case was indicted for corruption or something. Torque's family was also killed in a home invasion by the thugs of a mysterious man named Blackmore. And this is where the game ends, on a somber picture of Torque's family and a cut to the credits. Upon beating the Suffering, though, you actually unlock a prologue section that covers Torque's arrival on Carnate, where he effortlessly slaughters 3 inmates in his monster form, scaring the shit out of everyone who witnessed this. Not sure why this wasn't included by default, but what are you gonna do? With that, though, I can bring the bulk of this Suffering review to a close. To sum up my thoughts, Suffering's a pretty good game, to be honest. It's fun to play, the monster designs are unique and fantastic, and the atmosphere and world building centered around Carnate is all pretty damn enthralling. To be critical, though, the Suffering fails completely as a horror game. It's definitely more action-oriented for sure. Think like Resident Evil 5, basically. While I love the atmosphere and spookiness of Carnate, I was never really scared at any point, even with the malefic visions popping in on me abruptly. I think it might also be an issue of just how powerful Torque really is. You're armed to the teeth, never lacking in ammunition for your weapons, and with the Zombium on tap, alongside how durable Torque actually is, it's near impossible to die unless a shit ton of damage comes your way in a very short period of time. I think I might have died like 3 times during my playthrough, and I'm pretty sure 2 of those were from explosives. Regardless though, Suffering's a pretty good game. I'm not trying to bag on it too hard or anything. It's worth a play if you're looking for a more horror-y game, but you're someone who can't handle something more spooky-oriented like Dead Space or Alien Isolation. The Suffering did manage to get a sequel too, The Suffering, The Ties That Bind. Look forward to that video pretty soon. Anywho, my name, as always, is HadesManticore. I hope you've enjoyed this video if you've watched. Leave a like and a comment if you did. Tell me about your favorite horror games, or if you even like this game. I'll see you all in the next video though. Goodbye.